Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? I'm Chris. I'm joining you from Oxford today, and I'm really excited to be here with you to celebrate the launch of our latest position paper, Using Technology to Motivate Learners. I'm joined today by two of the experts who helped us create the paper, Martin Lamb and Hayo Reindeers. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yep.
I'm
I'm
excellent.
Martin, by the way, and that's Hayo down there.
Indeed. Good to see you.
Good to see you both. I can see we've got a fair number of people in the audience already. Where's everyone joining us from? Let us know in the comments. We tend to get teachers from all over the world at these events, and it would be really great to know where you're all from. So yeah, just give us a shout, let us know. I know that Martin and Ohio, you're pretty much at opposite ends of the world at the moment.
Yeah, I'm much closer to you, Chris. I'm in the north of England, in Leeds.
And I'm just about as far away as it can possibly be, which is here in New Zealand, about 12 hours ahead of you in the UK. Nice to see you both.
Excellent. I'm loving what you're doing with the background. That's great. I can see, we've got people from all over the place joining us. We've got some people from Macedonia, someone from Mexico. Oh, it must be quite late there, or quite early, depending on how you look at it. But anyway, yes, we're really glad to have you here with us, Martin and Hayo, and really glad everyone in the comments, everyone watching, really great for you to join us today. I hope you find it interesting. And yeah, we're here today to celebrate the launch of our latest position paper. We've been working on this paper for the last year, and we're really excited to share it with you. It's a really great paper with loads of useful advice about using technology to motivate learners. And as I said, both Hayo and Martin worked on creating it. So just quick introductions. I'm Chris. I'm in the marketing team, and I'm responsible for delivering our professional development content to you. And this includes our position papers, our focus papers, and I'm currently organizing various webinars and events on technology and motivation for you later this month. I'll tell you about those later. Martin and Hayo, why don't you introduce yourselves, let everyone know who you are, I guess.
You go first, Hayo.
Oh, thank you so much, Martin. So yes, my name is Hayo Reindeers, and I'm working here from New Zealand. And as Chris was saying, we spend a lot of time working together on the position paper with Martin and also with Gavin Dewdney, the three of us, together with Antoinette and Jordanka. We had a fantastic time having lots of great discussions. And we're really excited to see you all here today and love to have a conversation with you all about this.
Yeah, and I'm Martin Lamb I'm a senior lecturer in TESOL at the University of Leeds here in the north of England. And as Hayo says, we've been working on this project for about a year and a half now. I must admit that I'm more interested in the motivation side than the technology side. Whereas other members of the team were perhaps the opposite way around.
Interesting. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about the people we get together to create these papers. We always get a load of different viewpoints and different interests, and we can have great conversations like this where we take different ideas and bring them together. So this paper, just to tell everyone a little bit more, this paper is part of a series. We publish these papers every 6 months, and they cover topics like pronunciation, global skills, assessment for learning, and then this one, using technology to motivate learners. And they're meant to provide advice and guidance on the important issues in English language teaching. This paper provides loads of practical advice and tips to help you empower your teaching and help you use technology more effectively to boost learner attainment and learner motivation. So today we're going to, attainment's the wrong word, proficiency. So today we're going to introduce you to the topic and discuss some of the ideas from the paper to help you support your teaching. If you've got any questions, please do post them in the comments at any point and we'll answer them. So any thoughts you have, anything you want to say, we'll do our best to respond to you. But before we dive into your questions, I actually have a question for everyone in the audience to sort of open up our conversations today. So yeah, everyone get ready to answer, I suppose. And this is actually a poll, and I'm kind of experimenting with something here because this is a technology event. I thought I'd try something new. So what I'm going to get you to do is to hop to the reactions button and answer this question. And I'm going to ask, which tool do you prefer using in your classroom? Do you prefer textbooks and other textbooks and other printed resources, or do you prefer digital resources like apps and videos and multimedia? So if you like digital resources, pop a like in the reaction. And if you prefer textbooks, pop a heart in the reaction. So let us know which of those you prefer, and I'd actually be really keen to see what people like more.
Any prizes, Chris?
Oh, I'm gonna guess. It's gonna be quite even. What about you?
I'm really not sure. It's a good question.
There were already some likes in the event, which might skew it a little bit. But yes, let's see if there's anything else goes in. Currently it's leaning towards digital resources. And then we've got a bunch of comments. So some people have popped hearts in the comments, some people have said both. Okay, actually, and then there's some likes in the comments as well. We've got some thumbs up, we've got some hearts. Really interesting. Okay, so my guess here is it seems pretty even, actually. It seems people really do like digital resources and printed textbooks, which I thought might be the case. We find people like digital resources are great. Everyone loves apps. They're all really useful. Everyone really likes textbooks as well. Textbooks they're a classic. They never seem to go away. I think one of the interesting things that the paper does say, which I find really interesting, is, and it's right near the start, is this idea that digital resources and technology in general is just another tool to use. So we can consider these in the same category. I had one more question, which I'm going to ask the audience again. So again, everyone, do hop in the comments and let us know what you think, and then I'm going to get Martin and Hayo to give us their thoughts on it. So the question for the audience is, do you think technology is a useful tool for motivating learners? So do you think it's, and also think about your own experiences. So do you think technology is a useful tool for motivating learners, and why? So everyone, yeah, if you could let us know what you think. Martin and Hayo, I think I already know your answers to this, but yeah, could you give us your thoughts?
Go ahead, Hayo.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much for giving me the first opportunity to answer this very, very difficult question, because of course the answer is going to be, it depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on the technology. It depends on, perhaps most importantly, actually, how you use the technology. And Martin and Gavin and Antoinette and Jordanka and I had so many wonderful conversations about this, trying to figure out, well, what are those situations where technology can really have a benefit, and what are some of the ways in which we can use technology in such a way that its potential benefits can best be realized. Martin, do you think that sort of sums up our conversations?
Yes, yeah, it depends. Yeah, there are just so many conditions on the use of technology, and of course the choice of technology, that you can never be sure that it's going to work, that it is going to motivate, because it can demotivate as well. And there have been some classic examples of that in the history of language learning, haven't there, of demotivating technology. One big primary example being the language laboratory. which
Yeah, of course.
never really worked, and put a lot of young learners like myself off language learning. I mean, they've pretty much disappeared.
Sorry, Martin, you're not a young learner. I'm sorry to say that.
I was once, Hayo.
I do remember the days of language labs. And yeah, absolutely agree with you. They were. I do. It is interesting how technology is sometimes assumed to be automatically motivating, and you hear it a lot. People say it a lot. I think it's interesting how people are making claims about VR and the metaverse, and all of this, when actually it's less about the technology itself, as you say, and more about how it's employed. I suppose about the technology itself as well, but there's lots of thoughts that go into it, I suppose.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about, new technologies, and this has been a recurring theme throughout history, really, not just in the recent history, but throughout the history of language teaching. That every time there's a new technology, everybody gets really excited and says, "This is the best thing ever. This is going to change everything. Now we will never need teachers again, or classrooms anymore, or textbooks, or what have you." And every time, of course, it depends. Good teachers use the technology in really good ways, and it really benefits learners. And unfortunately, if you don't use the technology well, it's detrimental, as Martin was saying earlier.
Really interesting. And I think we have a lot of agreement from people in the comments as well. There's some really interesting thoughts here. So yes, I was about to pop that one up. Thank you. So yes. So here we have, yes, definitely, modern means of technology have lasting impacts on the learner, very enjoyable if the appropriate context is picked. I think that phrase "lasting impacts" is really interesting, because I think we do talk about that a bit in the paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think one should remember that these days technology surrounds us all the time, and learners' own lives in most global contexts these days, well, many global contexts these days, learners' lives are filled with their own use of technology. And I think the revolutionary aspect of this is the way that it can give learners access to a second language, primarily English. And this has genuinely had a big impact on proficiency levels of young people around the world, especially in the big cities, I think. So we're not just talking about the use of technology in the class, but also at home.
Yeah, I think, Martin, you make a really good point, and that is that sometimes it's easy, and we, when our discussions over the last year and a half ended up doing this too, it's easy to look at the potential downsides of technology, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about today as well, and which absolutely are real. Questions around security and privacy and digital well-being and all these important topics. And it's easy sometimes to perhaps lose sight of the fact that it's thanks to technology that hundreds of millions, maybe even more, learners around the world now have access to learning opportunities that previously were very difficult or impossible for them to access. And I think that's a really, really key point to remember, especially this notion that learners now can actually find learning opportunities, find support, get help, and access materials and resources from anywhere. And it's an incredible achievement, and it's an incredible development that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Can I just add one thing there, though? There is a kind of proviso, really, because learners, young people in Anglophone countries like Britain and New Zealand, also have access to this digital technology, but we don't notice any big increase in their proficiency in foreign languages, sadly. So then there's something missing there, and I think probably motivation is a key factor.
That's really interesting. That actually brings me to another question that I have for both of you. So yeah, you've said technology is a great potential to motivate learners, but it isn't always effective at doing so. So I know we can talk for hours about this, but I just thought broadly it was worth, before we jump into any more detail about anything, it was worth considering broadly what sort of issues teachers need to consider or think about when they're trying to use technology to motivate learners. Like, what are the general areas of consideration that they need to think about?
Is that a question for Martin or for me or both of us?
Either. Whoever feels like they want to jump in.
Martin, I'm going to throw you in front of the.
Okay, well, I mean, there is a huge range of factors, obviously, and our paper does go into these in some detail. But I mean, I'll just pick out one. I think that teachers really need, when they are thinking of introducing a new technology into their teaching, they have to think through the whole process. So in advance. So, what do they need to do before they introduce the technology, and to prepare learners for using it, because things can go wrong, as we all know. And if it does go wrong, then it's actually probably going to have negative impact, and it would have been better not to have tried the technology in the first place. Then a teacher has to think about the actual use of the technology in the class. How what is it going to facilitate? What tasks the learners will be doing? Are those tasks in line with the curriculum, and so on? And then after use of technology, and while the teacher needs to be monitoring very carefully the use of technology and whether it is actually whether the learners are truly engaged. And probably there will be some who are much more engaged than others. And then finally, after technology is being used, there needs to be some kind of evaluation and a plan for moving on, perhaps to other kinds of technology.
Really, yeah, really interesting. I really like that. Sorry, Hayo, you were going to jump in.
Oh no, yeah, completely. That's absolutely correct. The whole process. It's not just about one decision that you make one Friday afternoon and say, "Hey, that's a really great app, and I'm going to use that in my class." You really need to think it through, because it has an impact on everything that happens in class, the materials that you bring in alongside that, the way that you introduce it to your learners, the feedback that you provide to your learners, the ways that you need to observe whether your learners are or are not using the technology in the way that you had hoped for or had intended. And as Martin was saying, you really need to look at the whole process and then make a decision whether a particular technology is the right choice in a given situation, or sometimes it may not be.
I think that's a really good point. And I think, yeah, as you say, this is really one of those key elements of the paper. I do have some more questions for the audience to answer in a bit, but before we jump into that, I did just want to I want to jump back to the paper and just remind everyone, because we're going to have some new arrivals, some people will have just joined. So today we're talking about using technology to motivate learners, and this topic is the topic of a position paper we have just launched, which Martin and Hayo both contributed to. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it and how you can get access to it before we jump back to the questions. So I'm just going to share a quick, a couple slides that should pop up. There we go. Okay, so this paper, we've just launched it broadly to everyone today. And it's on the topic of using technology to motivate learners. You can see the cover there. We've got a great quote from Hayo in the paper: "The value of technology exists only in the good pedagogical use that teachers make of it." So this paper, it offers detailed guidance to help you use technology more effectively in your classroom. It contains practical ideas. Everyone who downloads it will get access to exclusive tools and resources, and early invites to the webinars that Martin and Hayo will be running on the topic. And those will be in April and May. So yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know about it. There's a download link down in the comments. It's a great takeaway from this talk. So yes, if you want access to that paper, And if you want to learn more about this topic and really go into the depth, and then, yes, get those free tools for your classroom, get access to those webinars and join Martin and Hayo again in a couple of weeks' time, then, yeah, follow that link down in the comments and it'll give you easy access to download that. So I just thought I'd let everyone know about that before we jump back to the questions. But yes, now you all know about that. I thought I'd jump back into the questions for the audience. And yeah, I want to turn back to the audience again for one moment and ask all of you a question. So again, fingers on your keyboards, and I'm going to ask Martin and Hayo to give their insights on this while you guys are giving us your responses. But yes, feel free to hop in the comments and let us know what you think of this. So the question is for the audience, why do your learners find technology motivating? Why do your learners find technology motivating? So yes, please write the answer in the comments and let us know what you think. Martin and Hayo, in general, I suppose, why do you think learners sometimes and can find technology motivating?
I think, first of all, that it's an excellent question to ask and a really, really powerful starting point for any teacher, because it kind of invites you to have a dialogue with your students and open up the conversation around, well, what is it that you use technology for? Not just in class, but also in your personal life, in your family life, with your friends, with your family, with colleagues, whatever. And what is it that you enjoy about that? What opportunities does that give you? Does it give you access to friends and communities, or does it help you in some way? And then that gives you some ideas as a teacher how your learners perceive the technology, and an opportunity for you to then perhaps try and emulate or copy that in your own classroom environment. So it's a really powerful question, actually. What is it that what motivates learners to use technology, not just inside, but also outside the classroom?
Yeah, and I think that we should remember that there is something kind of intrinsically appealing about new technology. There's a novelty effect. And of course, billions of dollars are spent every year by the ed tech companies to make their technology appealing to people. They want users and they want to attract us. And of course, that's good. We as teachers can use that. But I also think we should be careful because, technology, as we know, technology can become quite addictive. We want to avoid obsessive use of technology. We always want technology to be used for good, sort of life-affirming purposes. And Hayo mentioned earlier, safeguarding and issues like that. But there's also just the problem of sort of personal addiction, and one has to keep remembering, why are we using the technology? It's to promote language learning.
I really like that. Yeah, I think that's you're both making really great points there. I think actually the audience have chipped in a little as well, and there's some great comments here which I really like. There's one here from Laura, where learners find technology motivating because it's part of their lives, and I think we do talk about that a lot in the paper as well.
Yeah, I think I'm glad. Thanks, Laura, for pointing out that, and I'm just going to pull up something here, just a quick slide that we talk about in the paper, if I can get it to work. Yeah, so I mean, the notion that learners obviously learn using technology in all sorts of ways in their personal lives, and not just in terms of their their classroom. And learners learn informally, they learn with peers, they learn by themselves. As adults, we learn from colleagues. We learn through, especially younger learners with digital games and all sorts of different environments. And we had a really, really good series of conversations with the team, talking about what we refer to as learning spaces. Not just a physical place or a virtual place, but kind of an environment, any environment really that can potentially support language use or language learning. And we had, as I said, really great discussions about, well, what do each of these different spaces enable learners to do, and perhaps also enable learners to do things that might be difficult or impossible to do in a classroom, like learning with friends or learning for the purposes of communicating in an online role-playing digital gaming environment, whatever it is that motivates you as a learner. And it may not be the same thing that motivates me as a teacher or you as another student, but getting to know your learners better and investigating and identifying what they do and how you can bring that into the classroom is such a powerful technology. And we actually dedicate, I think, an entire chapter of the position paper to the notion of learning beyond the classroom and learning spaces.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, the learners will, in many cases, have better technical skills than teachers, and will certainly know. As Laura said earlier, it's part of their lives. They will know a lot of potentially useful apps or websites which the teachers themselves don't know about. So yes, invite the learners to teach you. I think it's an interesting area where learners can gain agency, actually.
I really like that. I think we had a comment about that earlier. As students are much better at this than us teachers. So I think that is a sentiment which some people in the audience do share as well, that this is something that as teachers we can learn about as well.
Yeah, that of course is true. But one key finding, both from our personal experiences as well as from the literature, is very clear, is that learners, yes, they use a very wide range of technologies for entertainment or personal purposes, but most learners do not have the natural ability to use technology efficiently and effectively for the purposes of learning. And that's where we come in as teachers. So we might say, hey, you're using whatever, Instagram or TikTok or whatever app may be the fashion of the day. That's great. Let's see if we can use that in the classroom. But as a teacher, then it's our job to see if we can relate that in a meaningful way to the language learning objectives that the class has at that moment in time, as well as helping learners to develop the necessary skills and knowledge to use that technology, not just when the teacher is holding their hands, but also outside of the classroom and into the future by themselves. And that's where teachers play a vital role around technology and long-term motivation for learners in using the technology.
Absolutely. Chris here in the comments, I think he agrees with you fully by the sounds of things. I think it's interesting, that notion of using technology students are already familiar with, and how it is the teacher's role to then help them apply that in a way that is beneficial to their learning. Yeah, really interesting point. I really like what you're saying there. I'm just going to see, before I jump to my next question, if there's any questions in the audience. Everyone in the audience, if you have any queries or any thoughts that you'd like to share, or you want any answers about anything, or any burning curiosities about technology or motivation, do just pop them in the comments, and we'll try and jump to them as soon as we can. Okay, I'm gonna return to some of those questions in a bit. Before we jump to questions from the audience, I do have another question for both of you. So we've been talking a lot about helping learners feel motivated, and how part of this is about learning spaces and their ability to connect with technology in their everyday lives to their learning. I suppose I wanted to ask what some other factors that influence motivation are.
I think we've actually already been talking about them, and I certainly see them in the comments. If we, I mean, Hayo's right. I think that learners may not know how to use technology for learning in an optimal way. if we think about why learners are motivated to use technology in their own lives for their various purposes, then we can use those insights to help us use technology in the classroom. And we do bring in a bit of theory, in motivation theory, in the paper. We particularly refer to self-determination theory, and I won't go into it in any detail here, but at the core of that theory is 3 basic psychological needs: autonomy, relatedness, competence. And we can see that when learners use technology a lot, when they're very motivated to use technology, they are actually they're doing it to satisfy these 3 psychological needs. For example, autonomy. We see that often learners are using technology to do their own thing, because they're choosing which technologies to use, and they're using it for their own purposes. Relatedness. They're often using technology to connect with others. I mean, this is so true. I see it in my teenage daughters. Their use of technology is primarily social media, TikTok, Instagram, and it's about connecting with their friends and actually groups, communities beyond their immediate friendship group. So again, relatedness, autonomy, and then the final basic need, I think, is competence. And often learners need, they will use technology that makes them feel competent, that they have mastery over. And I think that is really important. If we try to introduce technology, for example, which makes them feel incompetent, well, that's just not going to work. So we talk more about this in the paper, but those 3 psychological needs of autonomy, relatedness, competence are key, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, Martin, we spend quite a bit of time talking about them in the paper, because this has a very strong foundation in decades of psychological research. So it's not like we're saying, we think this is what will motivate learners, or that technology might motivate learners. It's actually these notions of, as Martin said, autonomy and relatedness and competence. And that's why, as I was saying earlier, in the paper, we spend quite a bit of time talking about, well, how do you develop that in learners? So in one way, you can choose the technologies that are appropriate and of interest and are being used by your learners, perhaps outside the classroom. And that is a very important first step. And as Martin was saying earlier in the conversation, you also need to think about the process by which you implement whichever technology it may be into the classroom, and to think it through how you can do that in the best possible way. But at the same time, you also need to think about, and this goes to the notion of autonomy that Martin mentioned, you need to think about how you're going to develop in learners the ability to make choices around technology use, not just what technology to use, but also how to use it by themselves. And that's why in the paper, as you can see behind me here, we talk a lot about this notion of self-directed learning and helping learners to acquire basic skills like identifying why, what do I need? What are my learning needs? And why am I using a particular technology? And how could I, what goals would be meaningful for me? And how can I plan my learning? Or what resources are most meaningful? I'm not going to talk through the whole thing here. It's all in the paper. But, thinking about helping your learners essentially to learn how to learn by themselves with technology. And that really gives learners a sense of achievement, of competence, and long-term motivation, I believe.
I think you're right. I think we have quite a few people chiming in with similar perspectives. So Chris again, thanks Chris, is in the comments, saying showing learners how to utilize technology effectively, whether it's spelling checkers or following people on TikTok or producing Instagram posts in English to interact with English speakers. So yeah, I think a lot of people seem to agree with you there.
Can I just add something here, Chris? I mean, there's there's two ways of looking at this. On the one hand, there's what's been called a potential authenticity gap, like between the classroom and learners' own lives. That often, learners' own lives, as we've said, are full of technology. They're using very sophisticated technology produced by these massive companies that can invest huge resources to make this technology appealing, and they're doing interesting things for their own purposes. And then in the classroom, they may be using sort of more clunky ed tech, and there's nothing more off-putting than clunky tech, and they may be doing it for the purposes of grammar exercises or vocabulary gap fills, and so suddenly, it's technology is not at all motivating if it doesn't feel like the technology that they're using in their own lives. So, this potential authenticity gap I think is of concern. On the other hand, there is the argument that, well, there's no reason why the classroom should be like their own lives. Learners come to school for educational purposes, and they certainly shouldn't be filling their time in school with doing exactly the same things they do at home. So, I think there's a balance to be struck.
So I wanted to. I think that's a really. I do think that's a really interesting point. I like the idea that it is about balance. It is about finding the appropriate way of approaching things. I just wanted to jump into the comments and grab a few opinions from people and a few questions. I think there's an interesting one here from Michael, which is perhaps it's not only about choosing which technology to use, but also whether or not to use technology. Put another way, pens, pencils, and books are also older technologies, which are also viable. Which I think is a really interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. I mean, you're obviously absolutely right. And in fact, in the position paper, the first question we ask, I'm going to read it out. I think I wrote it down somewhere. Yeah, question number 1 in chapter number 2, why use a particular technology at all? And we use the analogy of learning, how to drive a car. Well, maybe you don't need to learn to use a car at that particular instance. Maybe a bus is better, or maybe you can just walk to your destination. And it's the same for teachers. Sometimes why make things more complicated if you can use a pen and paper and it works and it does the job? Good on you, right? So yeah, absolutely excellent question.
We've also had some people comment, Martin, that they agreed with what you were saying previously. So we've got a couple there. So yeah, I do think people in the comments seem to be thinking the same sorts of things. Okay, I wanted to I have loads of questions for you guys. We have loads of things to cover. So I just wanted to jump forward. And I suppose this is a bit of a different question. I wanted to ask, and you mentioned this earlier, Martin. Sorry, Hayo, you mentioned this earlier. What are some of the potential downsides of technology, and what are some of the challenges that teachers might face when using technology?
Was that a question for me or for Martin?
For either of you, whichever you
Martin, do you want to jump in, or would you like me to?
You start, Hayo, and I'll compose an answer.
Okay, right. You take my half-baked argument and fully form it into something coherent. Thank you for that. Yes. Yeah, I mean, clearly, and every single one of us has had questions and concerns, and any of you who are parents, or really anyone who's been a teacher in a classroom, has asked, really serious questions like, am I comfortable with this? Do I even know what information I'm gathering here and where it's going? Who is this data that I am collecting here about my students? Is that going to, and who's going to benefit from it? And yeah, questions around security, privacy, and safety, online safety, are paramount in all of our minds. And there's another, I think, slightly more, perhaps slightly more positive approach to that, which is, loosely referred to as digital well-being. And I like that term because it includes the word well-being, which I really love, because, you know, well-being, that's nice, right? But this notion that we really need to think of our learners and ourselves as teachers in terms of our and their well-being. So just like we look after our physical bodies and go to the gym and try and have a healthy diet, we also need to have a healthy digital diet. We need to, you know, be careful and moderate our use of digital resources. We need to ask ourselves whether the use of digital technologies makes us happier or sadder and more angry. And we need to ask ourselves how we can perhaps use technology in more positive ways and for positive purposes. And there's a really interesting term that has been going around recently. I think it came out of MIT in the United States, called positive computing. And this notion is about using technology for, well, basically for making society a better place and for positive benefits. And, you know, I guess the main takeaway from all of this is that as teachers, these are questions that cannot be separated from the pedagogical, basic, practical, technical questions about what technology to use or when to use a particular technology. We also need to think about the digital well-being of our learners and ourselves.
Yeah, can I just pick up on the point made by, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Sosei. It's probably not how to say your name, but I like the phrase feel at ease. You know, teachers need to feel at ease with the technology that they're using. And I think if I reflect on my own practice in teaching in higher education, there was a question about that earlier as well. I mean, I personally, I'm very conservative in my use of teaching technology. I tend to rely on handouts or textbook plus PowerPoint. And okay, during the pandemic, I have been persuaded, we're always being put under pressure to use new technology by our institutions because it's, you know, looks good. And our institutions are being put under pressure by big tech to buy their products as well. We must remember that. So I've been, you know, during the pandemic, I've introduced one or two other things like Mentimeter and Padlet, just occasionally, but basically my teaching relies on PowerPoint because I feel at ease with it. And, you know, my students, I hope, realize that I'm at ease with it. And therefore, the technology doesn't get in the way of my teaching. It is a very useful accessory. But I would like to, you know, I always feel that teaching is ultimately about a connection between human beings in a classroom, between the teacher and the students and between the students themselves. And the technology must not be allowed to get in the way of that relationship.
What you were saying about the institution was really interesting as well. How there is that pressure from institutions. And I think that is a really good point. Could you tell us, could you tell us a little bit more about that and like the role of the institution?
Well, I see it not just in my own university, but also in my daughters are at secondary school. Their school uses all kinds of flashy technology, including programs for trying to control behavior. There's an app called Class Charts, for example, where the teacher can literally present the class as a kind of chart in terms of their good behavior and they produce monthly charts showing how many students have got, you know, how many good positive comments students have got and how many negative comments they have, and they produce these flashy graphs. So they're using technology to control behavior, which that, of course, you know, there is obviously something positive here because they've been using it for a few years now. But I do feel that, you know, that they've been persuaded to invest in this technology. They've probably paid a lot of money for it, and therefore they feel under pressure to keep using it. And there is a danger that it does get between, it somehow interferes with the essential business of teaching, I think. And I think we could see that in other aspects of institutional life.
Yeah,
I don't know if Hayo would like to come in there.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Martin is saying. I mean, let's be very clear. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that thrives on collecting data from its users. But I think the deeper and perhaps the most important point, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, you're alluding to, which is that you cannot substitute a real relationship with technology, no matter how good or interesting or exciting that technology may be. If you're a really good teacher, you know which of your learners are engaged. You have a connection with them. You can see who's not doing well or who is feeling discouraged, and you reach out to them in some sort of way to make them feel better and support them. And yeah, if you are that kind of teacher, if you're the kind of teacher who cares, then there are very useful tools that will enable you to do that in different and sometimes better ways. Whether it's using some kind of monitoring of your students or feedback applications or what have you. But the key the key point is that you need to be that kind of nurturing person and look out for your learners, and then see how the technology can help you to do that in a better way, not the other way around.
We also have a question here, which I thought was really interesting, which I wanted to pop up. How do we gain students' engagement by letting them learn a language by themselves? So we're segueing a bit here, but I just thought this popped out to me, and I wanted to see what your thoughts were on it.
Well, there's no doubt that there are some fantastic apps out there which do allow learners to learn the language by themselves, or alongside a class, and of course many learners are doing that. They're doing it for themselves. Yeah, they have to. I think to use this successfully, they have to have a bit of technological skill themselves, but they really have to have the motivation as well. But some of these apps are very clever in that they sort of provide their own motivational. They have their own motivational strategies built in. Probably heard of the term gamification. So these apps will have elements of games in them. They give, for example, rewards for doing tasks well. You get points for successfully completing activities, and then you're competing against other users, and there's a leaderboard and so on. So all kinds of incentives to keep going. For some people it works really well.
Okay. So I think we are getting some more interesting thoughts and comments. Thank you for that, Martin. That was great. Sorry, I gave you a bit of a curveball there. I moved the topic of conversation to the side, but I just thought there were some comments in there which I thought, let's jump in and answer some people's, because they seem to want some input with those. So moving us on, we were talking about. Prior to the gamification point, we were talking about we moved on from the role of the institution, and what you were saying, Martin, about how sometimes the use of technology can get in the way. I also wanted to ask, what are some ways that, because we talked a lot about the teacher's role, I suppose I wanted to ask, what are some of the ways in which institutions can help use technology to motivate learners? What is the role of the institution in this process, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, and it's something that we discussed at length in our conversations. Because look, it's very rare for a teacher to work outside of any and all contexts, right? So most of us work in a community of some sort. Even if we work as independent teachers, we still have others, like-minded people, and we work in institutions and with learners. So we're always kind of bound by some type of organization. But most of us, I suppose, work in relatively large organizations, and those communities can have a very positive and sometimes also a very negative impact on the use of technology. And we actually have in the position paper a whole sort of case study around a teacher. We changed her name. Her name was Mina, who very excitedly tried to implement a new technology I think it was around using digital games in her class. And this is based on a real story. As I said, we just changed the name, but who ran into all sorts of practical and technical and administrative problems because her institution didn't actually allow mobile phones to be used in the classroom. And there were all sorts of IT-related issues and administrative and privacy-related issues, with the end result being that the teacher became completely demotivated and said, you know what, I'm never going to run a risk again and try, experimenting with technology, because it's just going to give me a slap on the wrist. And so as teachers, in addition to all the complicated things that we've talked about, trying to decide when and how and where and why to use technology, we also need to think about, well, how does it relate to our colleagues? How does it relate to the policies that are in place in our university or school? Am I allowed to do this? Is there somebody I might need to consult with? And on the more positive end of that, maybe also, what resources, what support is available, what other teachers have perhaps had similar experiences. Maybe there are people who I could draw on as mentors, or maybe we could do something as a team and work on a project together. So I guess that's a long way of saying context is everything. Both in terms of, deciding whether to adopt a particular technology in your classroom, but also in terms of the wider context. You cannot adopt or adapt or reject a technology in isolation. It has to be part of the larger organization which you are a part of.
Yeah, I agree entirely with Hayo, and I think that is one of the strengths of our paper, actually, that it really does put the introduction of technology in the wider context and give some really sensible, I hope, advice for teachers in this respect.
And I suppose, as well as the wider context, it's also important, not only institutions, but I guess publishers as well. I think it's also important to ensure that teachers are equipped to use technology effectively, that they have the training, they have the tools and the understanding, and they're able to use it. I think institutions do play a role, I suppose, in helping teachers make the most of technology.
Training, absolutely, very, very important. I feel that myself, especially over the last 2 years. I think we've all been faced with the challenge of using new technology during the pandemic, and training is really important, and the feeling that you're getting support. And I have to say, I really like the way my own university dealt with this, in that it was very early on in the pandemic. We were given tools, technical tools to use, but and training, and a message that we don't expect you to become experts in this immediately. You will actually learn how to use the technology mainly through use. There's only so much the training can do in advance, isn't there? You have to actually develop the skills through use. And I think a message from the institution, or publishers for that matter, that just go easy, learn at your own pace. Here is some guidance, but you don't have to become an expert. In the old days, I think the tech industry didn't treat its customers with that kind of respect. They talked to us in a jargon that a layman couldn't understand, and I think I'm glad to see that is gradually changing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Martin. And it's interesting that we see some of the early research now coming out, the somewhat longitudinal now research on the last couple of years and teachers' experiences. And it's quite clear that there are some characteristics of successful organizations and the ways that teachers have been supported, being inclusive, being supportive, allowing teachers to take their time, and having really immediate support available to teachers in specific situations. And so there's all sorts of interesting ideas that universities and schools have come up with, from, for example, having a flying squad of people interested and knowledgeable in technology, who as a teacher in the school you could call on, and they'll be there in 5 minutes and they'll help you sort out a problem. And so you're no longer having to fix everything yourself. You can just focus on the pedagogy and have somebody help you with the technology. And I think we're starting to kind of collect a lot of these really good and helpful examples of good practices around institutional support.
That's very true. And I wonder how many, in how many institutions during the pandemic, one or perhaps two members of staff kind of emerged as the tech experts, who, not necessarily the person with the best technological skills, but the one who could communicate best and had a sympathetic, collegial attitude. I certainly can think of someone in my own department.
Chris, you're muted.
I am muted, yes. Sorry, I thought I was giving feedback there, so I muted myself. So no, I think that's a really good point, Martin. I think we do have about 5 minutes left to go, and I'm aware, Martin, you want to start your day, and Hayo, you probably want to go to bed at some point. So I think we are going to wrap up very shortly. I think there was one more question which I wanted to pop up from the audience, just because I knew it came in a while ago and we didn't address it at the time. Michael, I hope you're still around. So there's this question about whether technology and the motivation, whether technology causes intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation.
Martin,
that's a big question to introduce.
if it's too far.
3 minutes ago, can I refer Michael to my talk a bit later in the month, where we go into motivational theory a little bit? It's a very good question and an important one, because it matters whether the motivation is intrinsic or extrinsic.
And I think that is.
If I may just follow on, and I guess this will be a good sort of concluding comment from myself, because it kind of wraps up at least what I wrote down on my piece of paper as I was taking notes here, listening to Martin and you, Chris, and reading the comments, which is really just one word, and that word is balance. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're talking about technology and its potential to motivate learners, really the key word is balance. You need to, as a teacher, learn how to. There's no easy answer. Let's be very clear. If it was easy, and if we were able to just say, here are the 5 things you need to do to use technology, and your learners will be motivated, somebody smarter than Martin and I would have found it out and told the world about it a few years ago. And it's clearly not that straightforward. And that the art, let's be very clear, the art of teaching, whether that is with or without technology, and the art of motivating learners is a balancing act. It's like walking a tightrope. You constantly have to weigh, do I want to entertain my learners and kind of excite them? But at the same time, I also need to look towards the future and give them skills that they may not want to develop now, but that I know that they want and need in the future to be able to continue to learn with the technology. And all these questions that we've dealt with just now, including the one about gamification, is it intrinsic or extrinsic? Well, maybe sometimes a little bit of both is okay. It's about deciding when to balance in one direction or the other. And I think from my own experience and from the conversations that we've had in preparing this position paper, there are no hard and fast or black and white rules. What is the key rule is essentially care about your students. And if you care enough to actually show up for this webinar here, and if you care enough about your teaching profession and your abilities and competencies and experience to actually read a position paper like this, probably you're going to do okay. You're probably going to be fine because you're sensitive to where you are on that tightrope, and you'll probably figure out for yourself where that balance lies in your own teaching.
I think that's a really lovely note to wrap up on. Martin, did you have any final things you wanted to say?
I think Hayo has ended on a very pitch perfect.
Yeah.
note.
I think that was a lovely way of wrapping things up. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you to both of you for joining us today and giving us such interesting thoughts. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else learned a lot. And it was fantastic.
Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks, Martin. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Before we wrap up completely, I did just want to jump on what you said, Martin, earlier in response to Michael's comment. So yes, both Hayo and Martin will be doing a webinar later in the month. If you download our position paper, you will get early access to that, and you'll get an email inviting you to that, so you can sign up for that. You can also find the event on our website. So yes, if you want to learn more about anything we've talked about today, do sign up for those webinars, and you get to see more from Hayo and Martin. Oh, great, Michael, you're still here. Fantastic. I'm glad you saw that. Okay, so I just wanted to say to everyone in the audience, thank you again for joining us today. I hope you found it useful. If you liked the live session today, make sure to like it. If you loved it, make sure to love it. Please do also share it as well. If you know any teacher that needs this sort of support in their lives, and who'll find this interesting, then do tag them in the comments. And this really does help us all out. We also want to make sure that these sessions are all about you, our teaching community. So do comment and let us know what you'd like us to talk about in future. If there's any thoughts that you have about something you want support with, something you want extra help with, do let us know, and we'll try and address it at some point. Make sure you're following us as well so you don't miss out on any of the sessions we've got coming up. We're at OUP-ELT Global on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. That's at OUP-ELT Global. And of course, if you want to download the position paper, which we've talked about today, which Martin and Hayo worked on, you can find a link to that down in the comments. It's a great paper, really comprehensive, goes into a lot of detail about the sort of things we've been talking about today. And as I said, you'll get invited to the webinars and you'll get free resources. So if you want to get that, you can find that there. So that's everything from me. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you had a good time. But again, yes, last but not least, thanks to both of you, Hayo and Martin, for coming along today and for giving us your thoughts. I found it really interesting, and just thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, and thanks very much to our audience for joining in.
Indeed.
It
was great to hear from you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.